Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about indirect functional assessment. The purpose of these assessments, functional behavior assessment, is to determine the function of the behavior and the frequency or some sort of baseline of behavior, as well as identify replacement behaviors and create that behavior plan. So, what is functional assessment? It's the process to understand why a behavior occurs and also to identify how much a behavior is occurring. So, it looks at the function or purpose of behavior and helps us create more effective behavior plans. And similar to preference assessments, there's 3 levels of functional assessment. The least precise and the easiest to do will be indirect. That's what we'll be talking about through this PowerPoint. The second level is called descriptive or direct, and this is where the observations occur. The third level is called functional analysis. This is where we manipulate variables to determine the function of the behavior. So it's control. And so these all follow similar to description, prediction, control, and same with preference assessments. We have those interviews, observation, and then trial-based methods. We're all following that sort of triangle where the bottom is not precise, but easy to do. The middle is more precise, but harder to do. And the top is extremely precise, but very difficult to do. So the 3 types are indirect. Indirect would be anything that would not involve working with the student, except you could interview the student, but it would be interviews, questionnaires, record reviews, rating scales to gather information about the behavior. Then we have those descriptive assessments. This involves direct observation of the behavior within the natural environment. So both ABC data collection as well as any kind of frequency counts, duration, partial interval, all fall within that descriptive assessment. A lot of people call it direct assessment. And then we have functional analysis. I always say functional analysis, but some people say analog. And this is where we're going to test the function of the behavior in a controlled setting to determine what's maintaining the variables. Similar to preference assessments, very rarely do you do one of these. Occasionally, you might only do functional analysis in some settings. But in general, most people are doing indirect and descriptive within a school setting or home setting. You might add a little bit of functional analysis to confirm your hypothesis of the function. In clinics with more severe behavior, they might do the indirect. You always need record reviews and might do a full functional analysis. Indirect does take the longest amount of time, but it's the easiest to do. Descriptive takes less time than indirect, but it's still a lot. Functional analysis takes the least amount of time. It's just the most intense for what kind of training you need, doing it correctly. It's hard to mess up an interview too bad, honestly, if you have a set of questions, but it's pretty easy to mess up a functional assessment. So common tools for rating scales. There's some rating scales that we do utilize during indirect assessment. And these rating scales or interview protocols are packaged tools that direct your questions or direct what you're asking the parent. Some rating scales you can hand to a parent and just have them fill out. So one interview is functional assessment interview, FAI. This is free and available online. It's also available in a bunch of textbooks. It's a very structured interview to identify the functions of behavior. This is what I train students on, teach with, and utilize myself. Then we have a motivational assessment scale. It's called the MASS. It's a rating scale that determines the function of behavior. It's also free. You can find that online. Another rating scale is questions about behavior function, QABF. It's a questionnaire to assess the various functions of challenging behavior. These are both very similar. I don't ever use them both. I actually use the FAST the most. These are the 3 most commonly used rating scales: this MASS, the QABF, and the FAST. And then there's also a bunch of like parent-teacher checklists or intake forms that you can use, like developmental histories. I love the Basque structural developmental history. I use that one a lot. Whatever your company utilizes, they would train you on it. This is something that I do often have my behavior techs do. A lot of behavior techs may be working towards, not everybody, sometimes you just want to be a behavior tech, but might be working towards higher positions like a BCBA or a QBA. With that, like doing pieces of the assessment is really helpful with that. It also lets them gain those non-restricted hours. Doing a rating scale or an interview as a behavior tech is a really good activity for you. Of course, start with supervision, someone watching you do it before you would do it independently. But it's a good activity. And it's helpful to the person doing the assessment. Behavior techs, all of these assessments, you would never independently do them. You're just going to do pieces to help your supervisor, who is probably completing the entire assessment. This is the functional analysis screening tool. It is Iwata's tool. It's the one I use the most. It's free online. You can see they ask yes or no questions, and then you fill out how many yeses you have, and you'll get the most likely function. Now, it doesn't have a lot of precision because we're not observing it. We're not manipulating variables, but I don't use this to go, oh, that is the function of the behavior. I would never do that. I use this to give me, this is a likely function or has some evidence for this function. So maybe when I go to functional analysis, I can only run this condition, and I'll explain that more later and what that means. So it does help a lot to structure what we're looking at for the social demand behavior, escape from tasks or activities. Maybe when I do my ABC data, I want to do it during a time where the child will have a lot of demand. If that is a function, then you'll get a lot of behaviors at that time. And we're wasting less time trying to collect ABC data when there's no behaviors occurring. So though this is very useful and nice, you always confirm this with actual observations or a functional analysis. You never utilize this to say, this is the function of the behavior. Record reviews are a huge piece that I think with FBAs we don't do as well with this. School psychs who are working with psychoeducational assessment do this heavily. We are deep in those records. Records tell you so much. You can look at past IEPs, behavior plans, progress notes, incident report, medical reports, any other school stuff. I put IEPs, but like there's a whole... Within school, we have 2 files for a kid in SPED. We have 1 file for kids not in SPED. The special education file will have IEPs, FBAs, their psychoeducational assessment. Then we have their regular gen ed file. If you've been a parent or were in school, you kind of have an idea. It has your grades. It has any communication logs between you and the school. Anything they went to the nurses will be in there. All that just gen ed things. The things that happen every day to kids. Discipline's usually in that one. So you want to make sure you're reviewing both of those. When you're looking at this, you can find what situations or events preceded the problem behavior. I mean, I'm always shocked by how many behavior analysts in a school don't look at discipline. Discipline has everything. Yeah, I mean, I say this and it's not best practice, but a lot of times if they have a substantial discipline record, I can find the function pretty easily from the discipline record, because discipline records often have your A, B, and C. It has what happened before, what the child did, and then what the consequence was. So you can create a whole ABC data. I look at discipline more as a permanent product. You have to be kind of an investigator to figure out what's going on with the discipline sometimes, but it is so useful. So people who don't utilize that it's just kind of crazy to me. A lot of times with record reviews, we are going to just identify exactly what behaviors we're working on. We might not get any more information than what behaviors should we be looking at. Like the parent said something, the teacher said something, confirm that with the records. But it also might tell you situations where the behavior is likely to occur, possible function, And so you can get a whole picture. The other thing that's so key here is past intervention. So if they have an FBA or even teacher notes, you can see what was tried. And that obviously didn't work because you're still back at the table doing another FBA. Kind of know maybe we're not going to try that again because it didn't work in the past. So it saves everyone a lot of time. Those are both rating scales, structured interviews, when you talk to a person, it can be the client themselves or like family, teachers, where you're asking questions about the behavior. You might interview caregivers, teachers, staff, and clients sometimes. You want to start with open-ended about when and why the behavior occurs so that they can give you every possible answer. If you just ask, does it occur at lunch? And they say no. It doesn't occur at lunch, but you don't know where else it occurs. So you always start with open-ended, like where does the behavior occur? Who's in the room when it occurs? What activity is being done? And you can develop hypothesis of function from this, so patterns, and then you can supplement interview data with record reviews. So then you take that interview data, you look at the records. So who completes these tools? Parents, teachers, caregivers, staff are the people for the interviews that are the best. Clients sometimes are very useful here too. You as a tech might be asked BCBA or other certifications. They ask you to help gather information or clarify responses. They assist in this data collection process, and you want to be honest and specific when answering interview questions, so always provide accurate information. You can also be occasionally interviewed for an FBA. If you're a tech who's been working with the student for a long time and your supervisor is updating the FBA, you might be the one interviewed. That does happen. And so in that case, you want to be honest and answer questions really clearly. Your role is always to be honest, always to be specific when answering interview questions about the clients. You always want to help the families and teachers fill out rating skills and questionnaires when needed. And you want to make sure you're always reporting, taking notes of the behaviors you're observing and report any patterns that you might see. So the benefits of this type of assessment is it's quick and easy. It doesn't actually require a lot of training. Sometimes it's quick. It depends. But I always think of this as usually takes the most amount of time. Making it efficient to gather this initial information. It helps guide what we're doing next. So it will direct us to create the whole assessment plan. It gives insight from people who know the client best, so it allows people to give input. This also creates buy-in to the plan overall. So if someone was interviewed and they got to say when the behavior is occurring, what they think the function is, then when we create the plan, if we incorporated some of that information, they'll believe in the plan because they had input in the plan. Useful for new clients or hard to observe behavior. So there are cases where we can barely observe it, but in a school setting, you'll get FBAs. There's something called a manifestation determination. So when a SPED kid gets in trouble and gets suspended a certain amount of days, you move into this, it's a law where you move into a manifestation determination. So you determine if the reason they engaged in that behavior is because of their disability or not, essentially. In those cases, a lot of times the result is do an FBA on the behavior. And so this is often teenagers. And so the behavior is sometimes tagging. They're tagging up the school and they got suspended for it twice. And now you're in manifestation and you're doing an FBA on tagging. Tagging is not a great behavior to do an FBA on because it's hard to observe. You're never going to observe it really unless you're going to hide in the bushes at night to see the student come out and tag. So when you have to do those FBAs in schools, or if you're being supervised by someone who might have to do that in a school, it's all indirect. That's all we do. We can't do anything else. So there are occasions when we're only doing indirect assessment. Okay, so limitations is this is not an observation. You did not see it. So it's really based on opinion. It's very subjective, all indirect assessment. People forget details or maybe biased. You'll always have the teacher or the parent where it's just they've been dealing with the behavior for a long time, so they're a little dramatic about it. It's occurring multiple times a day, and then you go observe and you're like, well, not quite. And they're not doing that with bad intentions. It can be frustrating if it's a hard behavior to deal with and they haven't had help for a long time. It's just, and in their mind, that's how it is usually. Should always be followed by direct observation and data collection. If possible, confirm a lot of that with direct assessment as well as functional analysis. Okay, so you always want to be professional, be objective when sharing information about the client, be honest and clear. So make sure you avoid guessing and reporting what is actually happening, and you're always going to provide accurate information. So the purpose is interviews, questionnaires, and rating skills to understand the function. The benefits is it's quick and easy to administer. It helps guide future assessments, and it provides insight from those who know the client best. It's useful for new clients or hard to observe behaviors. The limitation is it's based on opinion, not direct observation. And then you're going to sometimes provide information as well as help with these assessments.